Good afternoon. My name is Representative Ed Haynes. I am the representative of the 72nd District of Forsyth County in Winston-Salem. I am a product of the public schools, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Public Schools. My parents were both educators in the public schools of Winston-Salem. My father was a district principal for 35 years. My mother was a speech pathologist in the public schools of Winston-Salem her entire career. All of my aunts and uncles are teachers in the public schools up and down the East Coast of this great nation. I am a public school teacher in background. I was a North Carolina Teaching Fellow Scholar at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I taught and was a counselor at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics. I am committed 100% to the public schools. I was also lucky, as I attended the public schools of Winston-Salem, to attend several different kinds of schools, some of which were schools that were not very popular choices when they first came into existence. One of them was Moore Alternative Elementary School, one of the first magnets, which also had its doubters because Moore Alternative Elementary School, under the leadership of Geneva Brown, said we can educate students from all different academic backgrounds in the same classroom. And we can do them in large number. We can do them in suite type systems. There were doubters. It was the only one of its kind. It turned out to be one of the most successful elementary schools in Winston-Salem. Moore Alternative School was not wrong. I stand here before you today as a shining example of how right Moore was. I went to Wiley Middle School, who also, at that point, took a stand and said, we can bus poor children into the most affluent neighborhood in Winston-Salem, and we can educate them side by side with wealthy children. And where we can integrate them into classrooms where their academic standing does not matter. There were people who did not like that and said it would never work. I'm a shining example as a graduate of Wiley Middle School that Wiley was not wrong. Wiley was 100% right. I'm also a graduate of Carver High School in Winston-Salem. Carver High School being of the same outstanding traditions as high school across this state, such as Dudley High School and West Charlotte High School, Fayetteville 71st, Hillside High Schools. High schools that don't necessarily post the highest averages, but have strong communities supporting them. And at that time, Carver High School was looking at public-private partnerships to come in and give us some of the support that we needed to lift up our entire school. Carver High School, in that regard, bussed in some of our most economically disadvantaged white students into a middle and working class black neighborhood school. And people said that it couldn't work. The Sara Lee Corporation came in and gave Carver the resources that it needed, one of the first such programs in the state. Our average SAT score went from number 9 in the city of 9 high schools to number 5 in the city in 2 years. Carver High School was not wrong. I stand here as a shining example that Carver High School was right. When I first came into this General Assembly this year, I campaigned as a choice advocate, but I wasn't all the way there with regard to choice when it comes down to vouchers. As I looked further and I thought about my own background, though, I've become convinced that education of our students, education of all of our students, no matter what their zip code is the #1 civil rights issue of our time. Educating economically disadvantaged students, and in particular black and brown students, is something that we can no longer turn a blind eye to. They have a constitutional right to have this choice. Who is going to take their case? This is the question that I had to ask myself. who's going to take their case, who's going to stand and talk about some of the things that have happened in our public schools across our state that have intentionally resegregated our schools so that we stack poverty on top of poverty, and we get the outcomes from that poverty within our classrooms that we all have unfortunately, in some regards, accepted as standard operating fare. Who's going to stand for the parent at this point who says they want a chance, just a chance, at a better opportunity for their student in the public schools or in the private schools? I think one of the issues that turned me to really start thinking much more seriously about this situation was a parent at one of our struggling schools in Winston-Salem who told me of their choice program, the neighborhood schools program in Winston-Salem, where you have a pod school, you have a homeschool and 3 pod schools. And the parent came up to me and she said, "Ed, I want to give my child a better opportunity within the public schools of Winston-Salem." The pod school, her school, performed at a 33% EOG pass. 33% third grade reading proficiency after the 3rd grade. The schools in her pod are at 95%, 90%, 85%. And she told me every time she applied for her child to go to one of those other schools within the public schools of Winston-Salem, she got a letter back that said, this school was full. The 2nd school was full. The 3rd school was full. And so I ask all of you, I ask the state, I ask these gentlemen behind me today, does that parent really have choice? I came to the conclusion that she did not. My daughter attends public schools. She will stay in public schools for as long as we can keep her there. And our public schools, I don't think you need to have any doubt that our public schools must survive. They must not only survive, they must thrive. And we want to make sure that those public schools remain, and they remain a strong, viable point of our options. But as I looked across the state, and as I considered what I was going to do, I started coming across numbers from our education departments here with regard to 3rd grade pass reading rates. And I became ashamed as I looked at Mecklenburg County, as I looked at Nash County, as I looked at Northampton County, as I looked at Chapel Hill and Asheboro. I was ashamed of what was going on with our economically disadvantaged students. As I looked back at my own home county, and I said, no way that's going on in Forsyth County. And I looked at those numbers, and I was truly shocked and embarrassed, and knew that I did not have an option. When I stand back and I look at elementary schools where economically disadvantaged students are only reading proficient at the end of 3rd grade, and the numbers look like 25%, 38%, 40%, and 90% of those students look like me.
That's right.
I knew at that point what leadership meant, and that we had to lead from the front. I knew at that point that I campaigned on uniting a district and uniting my colleagues here in Raleigh about making sure that we pull ourselves out of our silos. And that's why I stand 100% in support of our public schools, but I stand also 100% in support of choice for our parents.